Hi there. I wanted to tell a little bit more about my story and specifically about how I kind of arrived where I am, which is in the process of prophylactic surgeries due to being a carrier of the BRCA2 hereditary cancer gene mutation. And I think a little bit of background might be helpful. So when I was 17, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer, relatively aggressive breast cancer. And in the year I turned 18, I was just turning 18, she underwent a mastectomy and had some lymph node involvement and went through chemotherapy and went through radiation. And that was, when I was 17 and 18 years old. And so since that time, I have had breast cancer on my mind. And I spent a lot of time in the years between 17 and 41, 42, 41, thinking about breast cancer and also dealing with various things. But it was kind of the precursor. It was the start for me of really thinking about it. My mom was diagnosed only shortly, like a few years after BRCA was identified as something. And she decided that she didn't want to be tested. And she talked to us, like my brother and I. And at that point, I was in agreement. Like, what are we going to do about it? And then I remember Angelina Jolie having surgery because she's a carrier. And I remember thinking, that's not me. Like, I'm never going to cut off parts of my body preemptively. And in that period, my mom ended up dying of breast cancer, metastatic breast cancer, and it had spread to her liver. And that was really hard. I was 27 when that occurred. And there was a lot of growth and just kind of deep soul diving, learning who I was in that period. And then my aunt, my mom's sister, was diagnosed with breast cancer as well. And she ended up dying a few years after she was diagnosed, also metastatic and spread to the liver. And for both my mom and my aunt, neither of them wanted to be tested genetically. And there were, I think, several things that influenced that. But it was their choice. It was their life. And I didn't get testing, and partially because I didn't know much more history about my family than my mom and my aunt. Their mom died when they were quite little. So I kind of just carried on trying to be as healthy as I could, but I always had this feeling and kind of thing in the back of my head around my mom had been diagnosed at 44 years old, and I was getting closer to 44 years old, and I kept thinking about that. And my mom died at 54, and my aunt died at 60. And so that was always there. And as I became more and more connected to my body and connected to myself, my perspective started changing. And in 2022, a direct cousin of my mom and my aunt was diagnosed with ovarian cancer and subsequently breast cancer. And she was tested, and she came back BRCA2 positive and contacted me and shared that news with me, thankfully. I feel very, very thankful about that. And at that point in my life, it was not even a question for me, really. It's like, okay, it's time to be tested for this. And I live in Canada, in our healthcare system, it takes some time to get through the testing process and the education process. And by the time it was several months before I even had my blood drawn for the test. And then it was another 6 months approximately before I got the genetic test results. And I came back BRCA2 positive, and I was tested for 76 different cancer genes, and that was the only one of concern. And but when that came back, it still surprised me. It still kind of took the wind out of me. But it also made so many other things kind of fall into place. And where there was some sense that maybe we've done something wrong to have ended up being unhealthy with breast cancer, it just kind of removed that completely for me. I'm doing everything I can health-wise, and my risk is exceptionally high because of my genetic mutation. And in the past, I'd said there was no way I was cutting off body parts preemptively. However, when I received the news that I had the BRCA2 gene mutation, it was so clear for me that my entire life goal is to live a long, healthy, happy life. And the actions I can take to try and ensure that that happens are to have prophylactic surgeries. And I saw how my mom and my aunt were when they were diagnosed, and they didn't have a whole lot of choice. They needed treatment if they were choosing treatment, which both of them when they were metastatic chose very little treatment at that point. But I knew that my body now is healthy. My body now is capable of healing really well. I get to choose what happens. I also knew that for me, ongoing screening every 6 months was not going to be good for my mental health, and that I would be constantly waiting for the diagnosis, which I didn't think was a very healthy plan for me. And I felt so fortunate that I was so clear on what needed to happen. And so when I did get that news that I'm a carrier of BRCA2, it was not a matter of trying to decide if I wanted to do something. It was a matter of getting to work and figuring it out. So that's kind of the trajectory of how I got to where I am in terms of the start point. And I just wanted to share that with you because I know everybody, is dealing with it in a different way. And some people don't even know about whether they actually carry genes that predispose them to breast cancer. And I think there are like 8 or something like that have a predisposition to breast cancer or a higher risk of breast cancer. The 2 main ones, I think, are BRCA1 and BRCA2, and I'm a BRCA2 carrier, but there are more. And I know that family history is also obviously very, very important, and it's an individual decision. but I just hope that maybe me sharing some of my journey here will be, of value to you and support people in their journeys. Thank you. Bye-bye.